Okie doke, eighth grade. Our next unit relies on the environment and the major issue reflecting on all environmental issues and climate change. And we're going to look at whether or not climate change is a man made phenomenon and whether or not the U.S. should take drastic measures to slow down its effects. Arguing the affirmative in this case will be the liberals, who say that this is a crisis not just of our nation, but a crisis of humanity. On the other side is going to be the conservatives, arguing the negative, who are going to say, sorry, this is all a big hoax. This is something that is cooked up, is unproven science, and we shouldn't devastate our economy in order to do it. So let's get into it. Um, One reason why liberals are going to argue that man-made climate change is disastrous and that we need to do something about it is, well, they claim that the evidence supporting that the planet is rapidly changing its climate is undeniable, and that the impact of this change in the climate is devastating is undeniable. They're going to argue that changes have occurred far faster than any natural climate change can produce. Yes, there are natural changes that occur in our environment and have since our planet existed. But the rate at which our planet is heating is far beyond anything that has ever happened in our planet within any time period. Um, the past 50 years, you could even go back further, have each subsequently been the hottest on record. Um, the uh, NASA, which is a pretty credible scientific organization, says the average surface temperatures on planet Earth in the past 100 years have risen more than 2 degrees Fahrenheit, and there are projections that show that it could be another 5 degrees Fahrenheit in the next 100 years. With this happening, we're going to see Arctic sea ice melting at a rate of almost 13% per decade. That melting sea ice will lead to rising ocean levels and loss of land of people who are occupied by billions. Most of the population of our planet live near the coasts of our oceans. Rising temperatures will lead to more and more frequent and horribly damaging storms, like a Sandy, like a Katrina, and will lead to shifting tropical diseases. That will see diseases like malaria and other things coming into areas where they never have been. Um, and another credible organization, the U.S. military, ranks climate change on its short list of the leading risks to U.S. national security in the future, saying that it can lead to water crises, energy crises, more and more different crises. And if we don't do something about it, our security is at risk. Well, why is this occurring? If it's not naturally occurring, well, the liberals are going to argue that the evidence is overwhelming that human activity is the cause of climate change. 97% of climate scientists agree that human activity is the cause of climate change, and many would argue that the 3% who say it isn't are mostly in the pocket of the fossil fuel industry, according to liberals. They would argue that the human burning of fossil fuels has created a greenhouse effect, trapping carbon gases inside our atmosphere. And this causes our temperatures to rise more and more and more. Keeps pollution and other things that are bad for our environment, bad for our health, locked into our atmosphere instead of being naturally cleansed out. Um, and you can't explain natural changes in the sun's activity or other explanations of normal natural climate change with the 20th century global warming patterns, which run contrary to any other time that we've seen change in the temperature of our planet. They're going to argue that the evidence shows a clear correlation. As we have increased our carbon emissions over the past 100 plus years, global temperatures have continued to rise at a rate that they never have. The correlation is undeniable, argue the liberals. And that is why we are experiencing climate change, which will have devastating effects if we do nothing about it. Since we are the cause of this crisis, argue liberals, we must act now to be the solution, or we will face devastation. Not just here, but around the world. The U.S. leads the world in use of fossil fuel consumption, yet we account for only 4.25% of the world's population. So our action is imperative. We need to lead the world in this because we are leading the world in making the problem, argue the liberals. We have to act immediately to reduce and then eliminate our consumption of fossil fuels at the rate that we are. We had to lead the world in alternative energy renewables solutions because that is the answer. We're still going to need energy, but we need ones that have zero emissions and are sustainable and renewable. They argue that if we don't act now, the world's going to reach a climate tipping point where even if we act with massive reductions in fossil fuel emissions, we won't be able to stop the environment from spinning out of control and continuing to heat. If you look, you can see that the permafrost, for example, in the tundra areas is starting to heat up. If that does, that's going to release a lot of carbon from all that frozen organic material into our atmosphere. Once that starts happening, we can't turn that back. Billions of lives, trillions of dollars will be lost if we don't act now. And liberals are going to argue, in the words of Chief Seattle, that we don't inherit the earth from our past. We borrow it from our future. We owe a debt to the children of the future to leave this world intact, to leave humanity a chance. And if we don't do something about this, our planet, life as we know it, will fundamentally change for the worse. Conservatives are going to listen to all those arguments and say, nah, you're making this up. This is not science fact, it's science fiction. The planet goes through natural cycles of climate change, and it has gone through natural cycles of climate change again and again and again throughout the existence of the planet. That had all the changes that we've seen in our planet's climate have had nothing to do with human activity. Warming and cooling cycles on Earth are well within the boundaries of patterns of the past 3,000 years. It's nothing unusual. This is the sky is falling, the henny penny running around. Humans weren't around during the Jurassic period where average temperatures were much higher than they are today. Humans weren't around making factories during the Ice Age to massively change the climate. These changes happen without humans. They happen naturally. And changes will continue to happen in our planet. It is part of the natural cycle. So saying that we can control the entire climate of the planet is just science fiction. It's not true. Many of the climate change initiatives, like the Paris Accords, if adopted, will have massive impacts on the economy of the U.S. in a negative way. And again, this would horribly damage our economy for something that has not been proven. Adopting massive cuts of fossil fuel exploration and excavation will lead to losses in the trillions of dollars to our economy. Jobs will be lost. Industries will be devastated. Energy on the whole will cost more. Our worldwide competition, India, China, the main nations that we're dealing with economically, have rising rates of fossil fuel consumption that dwarf ours. And they're not going to be held to the same standard as the U.S. as these other within these Paris Accords. Adopting these measures will leave us at an enormous competitive disadvantage to our prime economic adversaries. It will make our economy, which leads the world, no longer the world leader. And this is a way of knocking the U.S. off of its economic pedestal. And it's an action of the world to try to weaken our economy to strengthen ours. And again, all this for unproven theories based on science, not exactly science fact. The climate change crisis is a made-up hoax, argue many conservatives. It's designed to scare Americans to enact a radical environmentalist agenda. Um, Other studies show this not 97%, but 47% that believe that climate change is human caused. That means the majority don't believe that we are the only factor. And multiple instances of science cooking numbers and agencies around the world to prove that climate change theory is fact have happened. There's plenty of evidence of people that have lied about their facts, lied about their findings in order to make the case that climate change is happening when the numbers actually showed them that they weren't. And a lot of this is based on theoretical, flawed computer models. There's no perfect computer model to understand how our planet functions. So, this is again based on science fiction, not scientific fact. Scientific understanding is constantly adjusted as new evidence becomes available. Um, there aren't facts about the climate, just unproven opinion. And as more evidence comes out, those opinions will change. And you can look in any area of science in the past few hundred years. What they said was fact, about, say the dinosaurs, is totally ridiculous sounding now, today, when, in comparison to what, they were saying 100 years ago. Scientific understanding is constantly changing. Sea levels have risen for thousands of years, nothing to do with humans. Sea ice is actually thickening, according to a lot of studies. And any of the changes that happen to our climate happen naturally through the natural fluctuations of the sun, not by us. So, what I'd like you to do, I forgot to put the little picture, so I'm going to try to find it for this one. Here we go. Is to post your thoughts on one of the issues in the comments section below. And see if you're leaning towards this as one of your possible issues for our debate. See you tomorrow for the last lesson on the ideologies.